Two stories, both true, both touching on our theme of unity, both pointing to some of the challenges that we face as we strive for unity between and among Christians. Man walks into a bar, muddy feet, backpack. Room falls silent. Men look up, their eyes hard, their faces set, waiting for the first word, waiting for the first trace of an accent that will reveal whether he's on this side or this side. He says, "Could I have a beer?" With his Canadian accent, the ice melts. Hold that. Story 2. Teenage boy. It's another bar. This is Vancouver. This boy is reveling in his ability to go into a bar and order a beer. Sitting there thinking, what do I do now? Guy sits down. How are you? Fine. Well, what are you? What do you mean? No, what are you? Are you Prod or are you Catholic? Well, guess I'm Protestant. Well, you see, I can sit down right beside you and it doesn't really matter, does it? I can sit in the same table and we don't even have to have a fight, do we? First inkling of the trace of hatred between people over centuries. The first story was told by Will Ferguson. Some of you may have heard of him. He's won several Leacock Prizes. He's a wonderful guy. He also wrote that story 519 last year that was set like a kind of a mystery story. And he wrote a book called Beyond Belfast, 560 miles around Northern Ireland on sore feet. And I thought, what a great title. Who could resist this book? And I didn't. And I bought it, and I devoured it. I didn't buy it. I got it out of the library. And I devoured it, and it's described as a humorous book. It's described as a book that's all about ha, ha, ha. It's not ha, ha, ha. It's actually, oh, oh, oh. Here's this Canadian who's wandering around Northern Ireland dealing with the traces of hatred, dealing with the fact that when he walks into a bar, the very first word he says brands him one way or the other. The only thing that saves him is because he's able to speak in the language of neutrality, which is the language of Canada. As a very quick aside, it's related directly to this. I was reading in the paper this last week, there's a hockey team in Belfast, and they're Canadians, and they have picked neutral colors. They've picked baby blue, right? Baby blue, so that nobody can get there and kind of go like, you know. So they're actually the most popular team in Belfast because they're, you know, and who will go to the games? Women will go to the games because they don't feel that it's tribal one way or the other. So this book is actually a very sad book because what it talks about is the traces of these deep-rooted hatreds that have brought both sides, and I'm certainly not for a second going to suggest that either side is entirely responsible, both sides to this sense of pain and mutual destruction. The one that touched me the most was the story of Dunblane, which was the little market town. And I was actually sharing with Jill earlier in the week that Dunblane was a place where people got along. And they didn't bother with the fuss, you know, and it was kind of like, well, you want me to watch your kids for you, Sally? No problem. I can watch your kids. That's great. And this sort of thing. And some guys didn't like that. So what they did is they set a bomb in the market, blew up 50 people, trying to make them mad enough to hate each other. And this is the territory where Will Ferguson's walking around and trying to find some sense of enjoyment. And I got to tell you, it's a funny, funny book. So I would recommend it, but with caution. Now, that second story, some of you may have discerned, was about myself. And it was about me growing up in Vancouver. And it's funny, in some respects, I was kind of ahead of my time. In other respects, I was incredibly naive. I was very naive when it came to social issues. And I was very naive about religion because I'd had sort of a conventional religious upbringing that had fallen away. And I didn't think about religion much. And for me to sort of be standing next to somebody who was telling me he could sit at the same table with me and not fight me because he was Roman Catholic and I was Protestant, I was just so shocked that my jaw dropped. But that is the true fact of the matter. That is the fact that we confront when we're trying to address this week of prayer for Christian unity, is that we have an awful lot of unifying to do. Now, if we wanted, and I'm only going to spend about a minute and a half on this because the examples are legion. If we wanted, we could find many more Dunblains, many more examples of people showing hatred to one another. I think of the Huguenots. They were the Protestants in France, who there was the Bartholomew Day massacre, and the great time in the 16th century when the people went around the village looking for those of the other faith in order to massacre them. I think of the example of the Crusaders who were heading off to the Holy Land in the 11th century, and they took a little detour, and while they were at it, they thought, let's conquer Constantinople, which happened to be a Christian capital. It was the capital of Eastern Christendom. I think of the schism. Isn't that a terrible word? Schism. It means like a gap. It's a grand canyon between ideas. A schism between people. The schism between East and West. When Constantinople and Rome said, you know what? You go your way, I'll go mine. And that's where we are. So you could multiply the examples, and those of you who grew up in Ontario or who grew up in Quebec or, I don't know, parts of rural Alberta, I'm not too sure, but Ontario and Quebec had these division points where it was pretty obvious that you didn't play with these people, you didn't marry with them, whoever it was. That's the way it was. Now, I want to tell you some positive stories. When I was at Forest Lawn, about 10 years ago, I had a chance to talk quite frequently with a pastor from an evangelical denomination. In fact, we shared the same church. And I was at first very leery of talking to him because I don't know, I thought maybe I'd get contaminated or something. And he was actually more experienced than I was. He had a lot of training and a lot of time in ministry. And he said to me pretty early on, he said, you know what, Geoffrey? We can find lots of stuff we can disagree on, can't we? Why don't we find a couple things we can agree on them and then do something together? I thought, cool. Isn't that easy? Just to kind of, say, you know what? Fine, there's going to be stuff we're not going to be able to agree on. Forget about it. Leave it alone. Don't go anywhere near it. Why not just find something we can agree on? There we are in Forest Lawn. Few little social issues, wouldn't you agree? Why don't we agree on helping the homeless? Why don't we agree on helping those people who need food? Why don't we agree on trying to come up together with some social issues? And sure enough, we did. And the two of us were kind of like an odd couple together. We'd go out for Vietnamese. We'd actually have really great times. We'd plan our little trips. We'd do things together. And I didn't realize this, but here in that tiny little microcosm, we were doing Christian unity. Now, I don't want to let us off light, because it seems to me that here in the United Church, I was joking about myself, saying, I didn't want to get contamination. We can be a little on the smug side. We can be a little on the smug side and say, well, progressive social issues, got them. Nice people, got them. Fabulous music, got them. All this kind of stuff. And then we sort of say, well, those other folks, I don't know. They got Rome. They got a bunch of celibate guys. Well, why don't we let that alone? Why don't we kind of scare ourselves out of our complacency and say, you know what? Those people are called by the same God. Those people are called by the same desire to follow Jesus in whatever way they understand, and to not be divided by east or west or north or south. So it seems to me this is our invitation. In the old days, we used to do a lot more pulpit visiting than we do now. And it wouldn't be a bad thing. We have a Baptist church a couple blocks south of us, right? Kind of, why not think about that? The Baptists have this sense of the immediacy of the Spirit's gifts. That's kind of the fire. I think we have that at times. But that's, I think, one of the things that we could gain from. And the Roman Catholics, if you think about the women in the Roman Catholic Church, faithful despite a number of challenges, I think you would agree. They don't see themselves reflected in the pulpit. They don't see themselves reflected in leadership. And yet, they're among the most faithful people you're going to meet and the most spiritually advanced. So I guess my hope is that we will try to get our own Canadian brand of Christian unity and, to be able to say to one another, let's find something in common. Let's find something we can do. Let's find something we can believe in together that we can make a difference. Go make a difference in the world. Joe, when he's reading those passages, he's reading the Corinthians passage, pointing out that there has been division in the church forever. There was Paul disagreeing with James, the brother of Jesus. They go up to Jerusalem. Actually, my brother appointed me as the first apostle. And then wasn't Paul amazing? Amazing in kind of like a sense, like a truck, You can't get in his way. There's Paul sort of, just so powerfully creating this image of the first ministry of Christ that he basically forms the Christian church. But we have all these examples. The old joke is, you got a little town and you got 2 churches and you got 3 denominations, our schismatic approach. So I guess what I would encourage us to do is to look in our hearts and try to be, a little bit challenging with ourselves and say, okay, where is it that we kind of bring out our smugophile and just kind of say, okay, where is it we kind of say, I know I'm right? And what if we weren't? What if we were maybe invited to a place where we were looking to others for their truths? And it seems to me that this allows us into a place of gentleness. It allows us into a place where we say, how do you experience your truth? How do you experience your quest? And those kind of questions, I think, are more open, genuinely, than the kind of assumptions that we can't work together. As it happens, we have an entire week to practice this. Can you imagine? The other thing that I loved about Forest Lawn when I was there is we had a Caribbean community, and they would tell me, I may have shared this with you, but bear with me. They would say, Geoffrey, your services are too short. An hour and 10 minutes, nothing. We used to go for 2 hours, and then we go up the street to the other church, and we'd have another 2 hours, right? So just by way of that, I would say you're invited to Grace Presbyterian Church tonight, when we're going to have the kickoff for the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity. Should you wish to come, you will hear Dr. Karen Hamilton preaching, and she happens to be a United Church minister from Toronto, but she's also involved in interchurch work. And you'll also have a chance to see Victor Kim, one of the great Christian leaders in our city. And I get to read the same scriptures that Joe read today. All week, we've got this opportunity to hear different people. You can hear the bishop of the Roman Catholic Church on Thursday, and it's in our bulletin as to what's going on. So, I'm not going to finish this on a negative note. I was shocked and saddened by reading that book and realizing that a simple accent could betray you or save you in the case of him. But we are fortunate to live in this country. We're fortunate to live here where an accent doesn't betray us or reveal us, and where we can seek unity and where we can seek to understand the other person's point of view. So I leave that to you. And if it's not inappropriate for those of you who do have a glass of beer, I raise a glass and I ask you to raise a glass with me to Christian unity. To Christian unity. Thank you. Amen.